and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Joining me this evening. Okay, now I want to get started off with something that made it into the national news. And if you don't know about the Free State Project, the libertarian movement in New Hampshire, definitely look into it, especially in Keene, New Hampshire. Something that hit Fox News was the Robin Hood. And again, if you're not familiar with the things going on up in New Hampshire, the Robin Hooding thing has to do with parking. And it was a pretty interesting. Fox News report on the Keene, New Hampshire Robin Hood. I'm going to play this clip here. Fox News, and it's up on freekeene.com. But here we go.
mind of the so-called harassment.
The alleged
right?
harassment, yes.
And what is it?
Sorry about
Said,
that.
according to city officials, harassing parking attendants. Well, now the city, which has seen their ticket revenues drop, but claims the harassment is the real issue, is asking the state's highest court to bar the group's members from coming within 10 feet of those attendants. Well, it's quite a story, and FoxNews.com reporter Christina Corbin has written it on this group's do-gooders, and she joins us more now to talk about it. So why is this group, the so-called Robin Hoods, why are they gratuitously feeding meters of strangers?
The simple answer here, Greg, is that they just want to save the people from Keene, New Hampshire from having to pay these parking tickets, and they consider it a form of stealing on the city's part.
Where does the money go?
They claim that the money does not go to improving the city as a whole, but that it goes right back into the pockets of the parking department.
Thus the allegation of stealing. All right, so how much money is the city losing because the Robin Hoods are feeding the meters?
Okay, so according to the reports that we've seen, the city lost roughly $80,000 last year as a result of this group's so-called activism.
All right. Now, the city says, what, it's not about the money?
The city says it's not about the money. It's simply about, their employees showing up for work every day and not being harassed. They claim that these activists are bumping into the employees, intimidating them, putting video cameras in their face, and making them fearful of coming to work every day.
So we do have some video you've obtained of the so-called harassment,
The alleged
right?
harassment, yes.
And what does it show?
Well, it shows, these so-called Robin Hooders following around 3 or 4 parking officials for 8-9 hours a day, literally tailing them everywhere they go, waiting for them to come out of bathrooms, talking to them and telling them what they're doing is terrible. And, it's some people would consider it harassment and others might not.
But the city has never filed any criminal harassment charges against the Robin Hoods?
Right. No one has ever been arrested, to my knowledge, for harassing the parking officials.
Yeah, which invites the question, is it really harassment in the legal sense? But nevertheless, the city has gone through the court system with the lower court first, right? And what happened?
And in the lower court, the judge dismissed this and said, look, it might be deemed annoying, but this is First Amendment rights, the right to protest. These are government employees. And he dismissed it. They appealed that, and then they took it to New Hampshire's highest court, who will now take 90 days to decide whether or not there's a case here.
All right. So it really comes down to free speech, First Amendment. What's interesting is that you mentioned to me that, these aren't exorbitant tickets that you get if the meter is up and it's not properly fed. How much is it? Right.
It's about $5 a ticket. If you don't pay it, it might go up to $10. But we're not talking like New York City $70 and up ticket. I mean, it's $5.
Yeah.
But what they claim is that, the people who are being ticketed are not in a fire zone. They're not in a handicap space. They're in a parking lot where they're surrounded by 10 empty spaces. So there's no reason, in their view, for them to be ticketed in this way.
Yeah. I mean, you've had conversations with the Robin Hood group. They're dedicated. Are they a little obsessive?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's sort of comical. They'll go around with these little cards that have the Disney character, the Robin Hood picture on it, and they'll leave it on the windshield of the car that they, quote, saved, so that that driver will know that they, were saved from a fine and a possible, having their car impounded. So it's somewhat comical, but they're very dedicated. I mean, they're very driven in their cause. Yeah.
One wonders, if they're so dedicated, why don't they just try to change the city ordinance or elect new city officials to ban the meters if they really feel that passionately about it?
I think they're hoping that the longer this goes on, that it might come to that. And we've learned, according to the city attorney, that some of the employees have had to seek psychiatric counseling for stress and anxiety. When they of course took on the job, they knew that, you you would obviously deal occasionally with hostile, angry drivers upset about getting a ticket. Nobody likes getting a ticket. Right. But the city attorney claims the behavior of this group is above and beyond the occasional, hostile driver. Sure. And it's interfering with their ability to do their job.
Well, harassment. They should spend a day being a TV reporter. See what that's like. Christina, thanks very much. Terrific story.
You're welcome.
For more on Robin Hooders, check out Christina's story on foxnews.com. It's a good one. I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Well, now you have this going to the state level courts, and the whole charge, it's harassment, they need to seek counseling, dealing with people going, you have a crappy job, maybe you should find a better career than robbing people. Do you understand what you're doing? This is really, in a way, theft. You have to pay taxes for the parking spots, and you have to pay to park in the parking spot. And then the money just funds right back to the same people that are writing the tickets. So, of course, they want to continue to write tickets, and I know a lot of places have actually limited their meters to like 15 minutes. And there's lawyer offices all around. So you want to go see a lawyer because you're in a bind. Well, guess what? You'll be in more of a bind once you get back down to your car. The whole charge that they're harassing, they could say the same about you. You pay taxes. The parking spot is, built. Then you have to pay to park in it. That seems like you're just robbing them. And even if it is only $5, it's a way of civil disobedience type activism. And there's quite a bit of positive things coming out of Free Keene, or the Free State Project, and up in Keene, New Hampshire, and it's all based around libertarian philosophy. And when you look at a lot of other places where you see maybe the Tea Party, a libertarian-leaning group, they go out and protest, and that really is where it stops. They lack the civil disobedience. The civil disobedience is something that's actually key to revolutionary acts. You have to be the change you want to see. Therefore, you have to participate in civil disobedience. That's not saying you're violent. It's the opposite. It's showing that, hey, I can, participate in this action, and look, it harms no one. The key usually, though, for a lot of activists, well, I can't say a lot or all or none, but some activists choose to try to do something that will less likely get them arrested. Then you have others that do things that they know will get them arrested. And sometimes those things result in really heavy-handed responses from government officials. AKA Adam Kokesh and the raid on his place with more people than it took to take down bin Laden. So, you know, you really do have to choose your path, but it's important to not be silent. And talking about Adam Kokesh, let me see if I can find the video. He had a new video up today, and it was this cop, and he was talking about decriminalizing, legalizing, you know, drugs. And cops that really start speaking out usually, you know, feel, you know, some retaliation for speaking out against something that, well, it funds a lot of law enforcement. It definitely helps fund federal organizations. But, yeah, here it is. And it's a cop says, end prohibition, legalize everything. And, you know, there's, what's that group called? LAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And one thing I've seen is when they do come out in groups, they tend not to have the repercussions that they do when they come out as individuals. But that doesn't mean that maybe LAP is the best organization out there, and I think it would be important to you and at least a few other people come out together. It's really the only way to protect yourselves from major repercussions. As an individual, they can discredit you and smear you. So something to think about.
This is Adam Kokesh at CPAC 2014 with Howard Woolridge of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And at CPAC 2 years ago, we got a chance to talk to him as well. And back then, the conservative movement was just starting to consider these issues. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot's changed in the last 2 years, not just in America in general, but even here in the conservative movement. The conversations that you're having here today, are they different than they were 2 years ago?
Pedophiles raping my grandchildren are a problem. Charlie Sheen dies today like Whitney Houston. It's a personal and family tragedy, but it is not a societal problem. Because 1,000 people die every day from cigarettes and nobody blinks.
Substantially different, Adam. I've seen this. I've been doing this 17 years. Substantial change in CPAC in the last couple of years, and guys like Governor Perry of Texas are leading the way, helping me, because a month ago he came out and said the 10th Amendment should be the guiding principle when it comes to marijuana policy. And that's all, you know, that's all I do here in Washington, say make it a states' rights issue. And so, and Chuck Schumer the next day came out and said states' rights. The NAACP 3 months ago said make states' rights the guiding principle for marijuana policy. So up and down the political spectrum, from the ACLU, NAACP, to guys as rock solid conservative and as Rick Perry are saying, apply the 10th Amendment.
So I understand like marijuana because that's not really like that bad for you.
Right.
Like what they did in Portugal, they legalized marijuana and decriminalized hard drugs, and that's worked pretty well there. I think that would have the same result here.
When you decrim everything, you still leave in place the black market. The cartels in Mexico have killed 70,000 people because of the American prohibition. This is shameful that we've forced on our southern neighbors a policy which gets 70,000 Mexicans killed, many women and children who were innocent.
Well, there wouldn't be as much violence if they weren't under, if it was decriminalized.
No, you're wrong.
They're not as much fear of getting in trouble.
You're mistaken. It still leaves in place the black market. You can't legally sell it. That means there's a black market, which means you're going to have violence and death, just like prohibition and alcohol, prohibition today with drugs. Mexico's blown to hell because of our prohibition. It's shameful and immoral.
Do you think use, though, of hard drugs would go up if it was fully legalized?
Would you use heroin if it were legal tomorrow? No,
but I think if it was fairly legal, I think more people would.
Show me the studies that said that regular folks not using heroin today are going to be using heroin tomorrow, or crack, or meth. They did a survey 5 years ago. They asked 1,000 adults, as a regular Zogby poll, if these drugs, heroin, crack, meth, all this stuff, were legal, would you try it? 0.6% said they would.
What about?
In other words, almost nobody is so stupid that just because you legalize heroin, they're going to use it. I don't smoke cigarettes. Why? Because I'm not that stupid. You could offer me $20 a pack to smoke them. I wouldn't smoke $20 a pack if you paid me to smoke them. I'm not that stupid. I have faith that the American people are not as stupid as some people think. That we're going to all go out and get high on heroin the next day, or all get stoned on marijuana. Look at Colorado. Have you read any reports in Colorado of hell and ruin? Now we've had 14 months of legalized marijuana. The short answer is no.
I absolutely support legalization of marijuana. I'm from California. It's like everywhere there.
What do you think the most dangerous drug in the world is, according to the medical authorities?
Tobacco?
Alcohol. You're close.
Okay.
Now, you might go back to medical marijuana in California years ago, but it seems like just the last, I don't know, maybe 2 to 5 years even, there's been a new wave. Right. Colorado, right. Washington State, obviously. Do you think it's fair to describe this as the beginning of the end of the drug war?
I would say that's accurate. Out of Colorado, we're seeing a thundering silence of problems associated with the sale, consumption of marijuana. That's why every day when there's no news, it's just a victory, because we see now you can normalize marijuana as a product roughly treated like beer, and the sky does not fall in. People go to work, they don't crash their cars, etc., etc. So this is a daily positive reminder that you can change policy dramatically, get away from prohibition, and it's a better world.
I know plenty of people who don't smoke marijuana because it is illegal, but if it were to become legalized, they would start, just because they're smart enough. They don't want to be, like fined or anything. Right. On college campuses especially. But personally, I don't have an interest in marijuana, but I know I go to Appalachian State University. It's the high country. Yeah. But but if it were to be legalized, I know plenty of people who would be going after it.
What about the children growing up in a society where drugs are illegal now? The social pressure, peer pressure in school or whatever.
Do you think they're at higher risk? It's okay.
And 4 young people die every day from alcohol overdose. Every day, 4 are dying from an alcohol overdose. We're seeing preliminary studies out of the states with medical marijuana that kids are shifting from alcohol to medical marijuana.
I actually agree that's a good thing.
And that is actually reducing fatal car accident rates of those involved with drinking and driving. So when you look at a policy, this is to get past the singular issue here. When you look at any policy in your lifetime, and you're going to support a candidate or a policy, you can't just look at one factor and say, it's increased marijuana's consumption by 5%, therefore, by golly, throw it out. Wait a minute, but we've reduced fatal accidents for people not drinking as much. And we've got no kids getting shot and killed because they have no job option. You've got to look at these things holistically, not just simply. Like that gentleman saying, it stays in your system longer, therefore it's more dangerous. Ask any cop who's not earning a paycheck off of the drug trade. Yes, it stays in your system longer, but it doesn't stay in your blood longer. And it dissipates out. And alcohol creates reckless, aggressive, and violent behavior. You're all young enough, but you still know some cases already. People becoming really stupid or aggressive because of alcohol consumption.
Well, hard drugs is way worse for that. If people,
no.
Absolutely. Our drugs...
Heroin, when was the last time you ever read or heard of a person high on heroin who went out and just, knocked somebody's head off?
Now, one of the concerns that I think a lot of anti-prohibition activists have is that you take away marijuana, then all of these resources that are in all of these various law enforcement agencies are going to go to other drugs, and all of those things are going to get worse, and there's going to be a lot of effort directed at people using other things that are illegal. Do you think that this is actually going to, the end of marijuana prohibition at least, is going to shrink the drug war proportionally, or that those resources are going to go elsewhere?
For the short term, they're going to go elsewhere. You'll just have more people in drug squads going after cocaine or crack versus marijuana. Law enforcement makes a lot of money on the drug war. They're not about to give it up, so they'll simply shift those officers from chasing a Willie Nelson and Green Plant to Charlie Sheen and his supplier. And you'll see that at least in the short term until more and more states say, you know what, the whole thing is silly, and start to move hard drugs down to a misdemeanor and de-emphasize that whole thing. And as cities and states across the country have less and less money, we're already seeing that. They don't have the money to chase all these people all the time. And at the end of the day, of course, as a law enforcement professional, I know the government can't fix stupid. If you have a drug problem, see a doctor, or literally shake hands with the Whitney Houston. You know, we can't fix that level of stupidity. It's for family and friends to fix family and friends. My job should be public safety, not your personal safety.
In a regulated market, when you buy the drugs, they will be pure cotton. Like when I open a bottle of whiskey, I know it's all whiskey. It's been inspected by state inspectors. There's no lead poisoning in it, etc. It's the same thing here. Marijuana, it being sold in Colorado, is being inspected. It's pure marijuana. There's no PCP. There's no meth. There's nothing inside that marijuana. It's pure marijuana. And that's what you want in the product. And that you can only have that in a regulated, controlled market. That actor who died a month ago, Hoffman, he died because it was adulterated with fentanyl and a few other things. He got a hot shot and he died of the needle. In Switzerland, where they have a program for getting heroin to their addicts, 20 years now, not one heroin addict has died in 20 years. Not one. Because it's a controlled dose. It's pure heroin. So there's no hot shots, no adulterants, and nobody's died in 20 years. And that's the Swiss. They're very practical about it. It's also cost-effective, by the way.
And consumption has gone down?
And consumption has been going down like this for 20 years in Switzerland. It's been a very successful program. When they medicalized heroin consumption, use has been going down.
Would you say that the drug users are winning the drug war?
No, because we saw in Colorado and Washington, many non-smokers voted to legalize, regulate, tax. This is a concerted effort by many people, especially concerned moms and dads who don't want their children to have a job option to sell marijuana and get involved in a drug trade.
Wait a second. It just came out that 9 out of 10 Americans drink caffeine or consume caffeine on a regular basis, and we know most of them consume alcohol at some level. So does that make everybody a drug user?
Pretty much. Most of us use drugs, and if you include sugar, it's 100% of Americans. And sugar is a very deadly substance. But we are in the process of saying every drug carries a risk. Marijuana is no play toy. My information is the 8th most dangerous drug in the world per the Lancet British Medical Journal. So we need to give the kids the message that all drugs carry a risk, and here are your risks, A, B, C. And we don't make this distinction between legal and illegal because we're having so many kids die from drinking alcohol overdose. Because it's a legal drug, it must be safer than marijuana. Well, we know that not to be true from a scientific point of view. And when we have a society where they're all legal and regulated, we can give kids good scientific information about all drugs.
Instead of insulting their intelligence.
Exactly.
What's next? What do you think the next step in this fight for substance freedom is?
Well, my belief is I have medium confidence that Governor Perry will be able to, and Rance Priebus of the RNC will be able to convince all major presidential candidates for 16 to flush the marijuana issue by simply saying what Perry did, apply the 10th Amendment. It ends the issue at the federal level. Then it's up to the states to decide what they want to do. And that's where we need to bring it back to. As Governor Perry said yesterday, devolve powers back to the states by applying the 10th Amendment to marijuana policy and other policies. And this is what we're going to see going forward. When the new president takes over in 2017, there's going to be 9, 10, or 11 states that are just like Colorado.
Okay, if it's legal and there's more in the market, the cost will go down. Don't you think that high prices deter some people from doing hard drugs?
You have a favorite beverage, right? I'm going to make it 5 cents a quart. How much more are you going to drink? And if it's alcohol, how much more are you going to... My favorite beverage is Crown Royal whiskey. You make it 5 cents a quart, I'm going to drink this much more. Because the price doesn't determine my alcohol consumption. If I'm an idiot and get drunk every night, I'm going to show up to this convention late and I'm going to get fired. Blah, 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 blah. So you have a favorite beverage. How much more are you going to drink if it's 5 cents?
Probably more.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your favorite beverage?
Dingling beer.
So you're going to drink how much? You're going to start drinking a case a day?
No.
5 cents a case?
Well, per experience of drug use, most drugs are already far cheaper than alcohol, at least by the average amount that people pay to get drunk at a bar
You know what
in America.
marijuana costs around here? It's ridiculous.
Well, no.
Here, it's $4 bucks an
here,
ounce.
but still, to even at the most expensive it is in the United States, to get high on marijuana, it costs like $1 or $2. I mean, it's like even at the most expensive for people that have the highest tolerance, it's like $5-10. You go to a bar
I'm from California.
and spend $100
I can
on
get
drinks.
4 grams for $20. I smoke. I came to DC. I paid $20. I stopped smoking because it's too expensive.
It's my experience as a street cop that the war on drugs has been the most destructive, dysfunctional, and immoral policy since slavery and Jim Crow. It's shameful. It's got to go.
And that was from Adam Kokesh. And, you know, it's really an example of the ignorance of people. You know, if you legalize heroin, everybody's going to go out and do heroin. Well, if you're legalizing pot, heroin, you know why a lot of people, they've been able to even claim that marijuana is a gateway drug, and a lot of people have gone from marijuana to a harder drug. One, they weren't people that were into alcohol. Go to the bar, you know, get drunk. Costs a little bit of money. Not saying other drugs don't cost money, but the amount it takes to get a buzz compared to what it would take to get drunk tends to be a little bit cheaper on the illegal drug side. The reason, though, they go from marijuana to other drugs, which I've seen people do this, and, you know, it's really sad to watch these people go down this road, all because marijuana stays in your system too long. I have a drug test coming up every once a month at work, or they could do a random, which, you know, I work weekends at a place, you know, they could do a random if they wanted. You know, that's something that you know. And a lot of times it's not even the company, it's the insurance. So I've watched these people go from drugs like marijuana to, you know, harder drugs because, well, it'll be out of my system in a day or two. Personally, me, I look at them like, did I just hear what you said? Yeah, I'll do this drug that's terrible because it'll be out of my system faster and I can catch a buzz for cheap. And it's like, you understand what they're saying, but you still don't see the logic in it because you know. And I don't know, maybe if it's that they just really haven't come face to face with it, or they just thought someone maybe had a mental problem. They didn't think it was a drug. It's like, no, when they're off the drug, they're fine, but no, they don't have a mental issue. They're just pretty high right now. But you wonder what's going through their mind. And, you know, I usually don't have a problem with anybody that I've come in contact with or been around that smoke. People that drink, now that's another question. I've definitely ran into a few people that were violent, aggressive. Had to fend off a few and put a few in check, but the potheads, usually they're the ones that, if you're at a party or something, they were the ones that were sitting on the couch saying hi to everyone. The friendly ones on the couch. You're like, yeah, I definitely can see how alcohol is way worse than the marijuana. Now the harder drugs again, I've seen it. You know, you see the people that are affected by these drugs, and yeah, they're bad. But guess what? It's illegal, and they're still drug addicts. Well, it could be 2 or more. No. It's too easy to get. People want it, they can get it. And the harder drugs are out of their system faster. So they go and get that because, well, I don't have to worry about a random at work. And it all comes down to addiction. Now, my addiction is coffee. Don't mess with my coffee, man. Coffee is definitely my addiction, the caffeine. And it's a drug. I like coffee. Coffee doesn't make me extremely hyper. Keeps me from passing out. I've definitely built up the tolerance for coffee, but I still need to cut back. I understand I drink too much coffee sometimes. Seems like I'm always on the go, so if I don't drink a coffee, I get wore out faster, and well, that's because it's a drug and it's keeping me going. And that's probably why I feel wore out when I finally hit the sack. We all have our vices. Some vices are better than others. Some don't show immediate problems. Like if you do get too addicted, I've seen people that were popping caffeine pills like they were going out of style. And it got to a point where they couldn't ever stop shaking. They were in a 24/7 shake. And, you know, everything can be abused. And one thing the cop there was saying was sugar. Sugar is a drug. Sugar can be deadly. Well, I know where he's coming. Yes, it can be deadly. Too much sugar intake can cause diabetes. I also think processed sugar, over-processed sugar, bleached and everything, probably doesn't help out. Depending on what kind of sugar, you know, you got beet sugar, cane sugar. You know, I think some of that. I definitely think the artificial aspartame type stuff is definitely harmful. I think one of the least harmful sweeteners, one would be honey, and two would be probably maple syrup. Even though, yes, too much of that can be bad. I think, though, if you do got a sweet tooth, one thing I've done is tried to take in more honey instead of, cane sugar. And another thing I've tried to do is replace, your cheap sugar with more raw sugar. Something that hasn't been processed as much. Because you got to realize that there's, your brain feeds off of sugar. There's good things about sugar, even though it can be a really bad thing. I think there's also other things in, maybe the sugar cane that, along with the sugar itself, might, be helpful. Not a scientist, not saying it is, but one thing I have noticed about the scientific side of it, you see that when they try to make a synthetic form of something, it still never has quite the results as the natural. And you wonder why that is. Well, because all those things you consider unnecessary that you don't synthetically produce, that, well, it's part of the plant. You know, it's not that one thing we're trying to pull out of the plant. The plant has other things. Well, if you don't fully understand how all of those things are interacting with the body and that one substance you're trying to pull out of that plant, or trying to, you know, create in a lab a synthetic version, if you don't understand all the connections that maybe nature has perfected, that maybe the human race has evolved to accept, maybe when you make it in a lab and you're missing some of those key elements of nature, maybe that could be why it doesn't have the same effect. And you know, these are things that aren't questioned quite as much. But we see that really the drug war and most anything the government does is not for your safety. You know, the nurse that came back from West Africa directly in contact and treating Ebola patients raised a fuss, and they released her from the quarantine and said that she should do a voluntary 21-day home quarantine, minus the day she was in the tent. And, well, she has come out and said that she will not comply with the additional 21-day home quarantine. Yeah. Well, if the drug war is to protect people from the evil drugs, then you tell Christie, which I think all this is just BS in the first place. I don't believe really a lot of this. But she was in quarantine. And I'm not saying don't go over there, but really, you're going to be in direct contact, and then instead of going, I understand that there's a possibility I could spread this. Let's just be in quarantine that way. I don't cause panic. Now, I'm not saying, you know, or she doesn't have anything, but we still need to round her up. No, what I'm saying is she, as a person, has a ignorance, and she don't really have any humanity. It's selfishness, which selfishness could be good, but what should really be in play is if she spreads this, she should be liable. Okay, there's the libertarian view on it. No, I don't think someone should be able to take you at gunpoint and imprison you because you were in a country with Ebola and you treated an Ebola patient. But I think that if you blatantly, with all what's going on, go, I'm not going to quarantine myself. I'll go where I want. Hey, I think we should go bowling and then to the mall. Yeah. If you do infect someone because of your ignorance or arrogance, you're liable for that. And people are like, what, you know, you could get the flu and give it to someone. The flu has less than a 1% kill rate. Ebola's above 70. Have a major pandemic over in West Africa that she was in the heart of. And we have, everybody scrambling here to have proper procedures in place to keep it from becoming a pandemic over here. And she goes on national news knowing the 70% kill rate, and if it does start spreading in the United States, it could become a pandemic here. Knowing that, she blatantly goes on live air and says this stuff. I'm going to play it here.
Hickox is with us now via Skype. Her attorney, Norman Siegel, is joining us as well. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Casey, good morning to you. Let me ask, I've been told you were at an undisclosed location. I see Fort Kent, Maine. Where are you exactly?
I am back at my house in Fort Kent, Maine now.
Have you been there since you returned home to Maine on Monday?
I have not. I was in a different location for one night. It was going to be a very long drive. I would have arrived home around 3 a.m. in the morning if we had driven all the way. But we came in last night, and I'm happy to be back home.
In the most basic terms, Casey, have you been adhering to voluntary isolation conditions since you've been back in Maine?
I have. The other location that I was in, I stayed in the house. I didn't have contact with people. Obviously, I've been doing my self-monitoring, and I plan to do the same today in my home in Fort Kent.
How long do you plan to continue that? It's my understanding that your 21-day isolation period would be up on November 10th. Will you stick to these same guidelines until then?
I don't plan on sticking to the guidelines. I remain appalled by these home quarantine policies that have been forced upon me, even though I am in perfectly good health and feeling strong and have been this entire time completely symptom-free. I'm thankful to be out of the tent in Newark, but I found myself in yet another prison, just in a different environment.
Let me read you something that Mary Mayhew has said. She's the Commissioner of Health and Human Services up in Maine. She says, quote, "We're confident that selfless health workers who are brave enough to care for Ebola patients in a foreign country will be willing to take reasonable steps to protect residents of their own country. However, we are willing to pursue legal authority, if necessary, to ensure risk is minimized for Mainers." I guess the debatable term then is reasonable steps. What's reasonable to you?
I completely agree that aid workers coming back from Ebola assignments are willing to take reasonable steps. And organizations like mine, Doctors Without Borders, have for a long time had reasonable steps in process, which is really self-monitoring, taking your temperature twice a day, understanding that if you develop symptoms, you need to be tested, specifically a fever and some of the more general symptoms. And these policies have worked in the past.
We've got 6 states that basically are going along with the guidelines put in place in New York and New Jersey. You have the Joint Chiefs of Staff recommending to the Department of Defense that troops, U.S. troops coming home from Ebola fighting missions in West Africa, be quarantined for 21 days. Why is it so abhorrent to you to put yourself in that very same position?
I truly believe that this policy is not scientifically nor constitutionally just. And so I am not going to sit around and be bullied by politicians and forced to stay in my home when I am not a risk to the American public. We know that if I developed symptoms, I would isolate in my house. I would call the health department and I would arrange to be safely transferred and tested in a facility that was prepared to safely do those things for me.
This all started when you got to New Jersey, though, Casey. And let me just go back and put this into context. When you arrived at Liberty or Newark Liberty International Airport and told people you had just been in Sierra Leone and you've been treating Ebola patients, and they used that thermal scanner on your forehead after a few hours and it registered you at 101. You have to remember that just a couple of days earlier, Dr. Craig Spencer returned from Guinea where he was treating Ebola patients. He moved freely about the New York area. Then he developed symptoms and was diagnosed with Ebola. Do you understand what that did to the psyche of public officials in what is a metropolis of 9 million people?
Of course, I do understand that it has created a lot of fear, but we still have to make policies based on evidence. And, you know, the issue at Newark Airport is sort of a different issue. I saw complete disorganization. I saw no leadership. And if you're going to put a policy like that in place that, impedes on my civil rights, then you need to have the administrative details worked out before you start detaining me in an airport for no reason.
I'm going to ask Norm this question in a second. Are you prepared to take legal action not only against the state of New Jersey, but now the state of Maine if they decide to enforce this quarantine period?
Is that for me or Norm?
That's for you, and then I'll ask Norm the same thing.
I'm not talking about New Jersey right now, but if the restrictions placed on me by the state of Maine are not lifted by Thursday morning, I will go to court to fight for my freedom.
What's the legal grounds, Norm?
Well, to use a sports metaphor, the ball's in the court of Maine. If they decide to go to court to get a court order and physically apprehend her to quarantine her, we will go to court to challenge it. They have absolutely no justification to quarantine Casey, and if necessary, we'll fight to obtain her freedom.
Casey, let me end on this question. There's been some debate over whether this quarantine period will have a chilling effect on other health workers and their desire to go to West Africa and help with Ebola patients. Do you think, A, that it will have that chilling effect? Would you go back under the current situation?
I do think it will have a negative effect on the overall response for this outbreak, which is terrible because we have to remember that we need to fight Ebola at its source in West Africa right now. I think it's already difficult for people to take time out of their lives to go and respond and to put these extra measures in place that, again, are not scientifically just. I think it will be a big deterrent, and I think these are things that we really need to fight for.
I lied to you. So would you go back? That's one question. I have one more for you.
Yeah, of course, I would go back. This has been a bit of a nightmare for me, but my work in Sierra Leone for 4 weeks was amazing, and I feel privileged to have been able to help fight this battle, and I do plan on going back. In fact, it's not just will I, it's more of a when.
You've said that we shouldn't get health care advice or medical advice from governors. Governor Christie was on this show yesterday and said he's confident that when all is said and done, he'll be judged that he was on the right side of both science and public opinion. Is there a compromise here?
I hope so. I think we need a couple of things. I think we need more education about the disease, and I think we need to not be taking these mixed messages from politicians. But I do think there's a compromise. I don't think it's being met right now because currently I'm the one that's suffering.
Casey Hickox. Casey, thank you very much. Norm Siegel.
Okay, maybe she is fine. Maybe she understands some of the risks. I still think how she's went about everything. But how she's gone about it all, it just kind of strikes me as someone that has no care for, public safety. I don't want to say she doesn't, because she might. Excuse me. Let's have a little issue there with the computer, but we're good now. I don't know, it just seems like, well, if I get the symptoms, then I'll go to the right place. And what if you start out the day and you don't feel too bad and you feel pretty fine. Maybe you're a little tired and seem a little different. You go out, you start doing things. And you start coughing a little bit, I'm not, could that be? You start coughing some more, a of a sudden you're coughing, makes you throw up, and you see blood, and, well, now you just potentially spread it to others if you were in a public place. So I think just as a person, if I'm me personally, I don't think it would be best for me to go over there. So, of course, I'm not going over there. I applaud those who do and have the expertise to help out over there, and that's fine. But let's say I did have that expertise, and I felt comfortable enough with my expertise to go over there and help out. I would voluntarily quarantine myself. Definitely after seeing the effects of it over there. Knowing I don't want the potential of those effects being here when they're not here in the pandemic level that it is over there. I would want to lower the risk the best I could, and 21 days, less than a month, I don't think that would be too much to ask of someone, and I don't think that would be too much to bear. Not that I would just love it so much, but I would definitely do it willingly. And that, like I said before, I don't think she should be forcibly quarantined, but I think her saying right there on live air that, no, I'm not going to abide by the guidelines, the quarantine guidelines, and stick to that for 21 days. I'm not going to do that. And she goes out, and what happens, like I said, what could happen? I think she should, at least in the eyes of people, be looked at as someone that harmed others. She arrogantly, in my view, that would be an arrogant move, put people's lives in danger. And if it became something spread and more people got it and died, I don't want to say that her life should be taken for it, but it should be known what she did, and I don't think she should be allowed to work in the medical field. Of course, I have extreme mistrust in the medical field. Extreme mistrust in the medical field. I've seen so much crap out of the medical field. I've watched so much crap go on. I've had to deal with crap with the VA hospital and my grandfather. He's a World War II vet. It's just... It's a control mechanism. And Obamacare really sealed that. That's how I look at the medical field. And that's my personal experience with the medical field. It has nothing any longer to do with your health. Even if these doctors go in with the best intentions, what they're basically told and taught to do does not usually benefit the consumer of that health care. The pharmaceuticals, I think, are not helpful. They might take away pain and maybe mask symptoms, but they don't ever get down to the root problems. I've seen a lot of times where the medicine causes so many side effects that by the end of it, you're taking a shoebox full of pills. I've seen it where the medical field has been basically used by the government, questions they start asking, which we know Obamacare plays right into that even farther, which I always seen stuff like that starting to happen before Obamacare, but basically Obamacare put it into law. Even with the VA, let's use my grandfather for example. My grandma's basically been in a nursing home / rehab. And my grandpa, he gets his VA benefits, which, you know, he has a nurse come by once every 2 weeks and checks his pills, and they go ahead and fill a month's worth of pills for him in this little organizer. He's always been stubborn about his medication. That's nothing new because, like I said, a shoebox full of pills, and it wasn't like that when he started out. I remember when I was young, and he had maybe 4 different types of pills that he took. Now he takes 4 different types of pills for breakfast, probably another 5 different pills for afternoon, and then a whole nother set of pills for the evening, plus his insulin. And then you still get to a point where once my grandma was out of the house, they thought they were going to come over and start pushing him around, basically. Go, no, you know, your age, you should be in a nursing home. And he was like, hell no, I'm living right here. And then they wanted to send a doctor out for a driver's evaluation. And I went over there, and, well, the doctor showed up to see me and never did ask a question about it. Then he tried to show up again and ambush my grandfather when I wasn't there. And what's getting me is, well, my grandfather drives the speed limit. Hasn't been in a wreck. I've been in more wrecks in the past 3 years than he's been in. 5 years, 10 years. I can't remember the last time he was in a wreck. Has it had speeding tickets? Drives every single day, half hour to go see my grandma, half hour back, and then a lot of times he stops a couple places in town maybe to see my mom. Then he drives that half hour back, and he doesn't have a problem driving, and they basically they're trying to find out a way they could maybe take his driver's license away. And we ask, why might they do something like that? Well, then they can say, well, since you can't drive, you know, you're kind of out of luck, and you need to be in a nursing home. That's their goal. Once they reach a certain age, we'll just stick them in a nursing home, and then we can just basically forget about them. There's people paid, and that's what they do. Then we don't have to worry about them. And the doctor tried to look at my grandfather and go, really, I think you're too old to be driving. My grandfather's 87 years old. Doesn't even look 87. He looks like he's probably maybe late 70s, early 80s. Definitely doesn't look 87. He has bad knees. That's his main issue. He's fine driving. It's just walking too far. His knees are basically bone on bone because he's a diabetic, and then he also is on blood thinner. they don't want to take him off the blood thinner to do surgery. So he's kind of just stuck with the bone on bone. Yeah, he drives fine, but they really just want to put him in a nursing home, and I'm thinking he's too old to drive. You really would say something like that. There was a gentleman Glenn Beck had on. I don't want to say 100%. I know he was in his 90s. I want to say 94 years old. Flew in World War II. And over Germany, he's the one that started dropping candy to all the kids. And to this day, he still flies the airplane and drops candies. Not only over in Germany, but now he does it around the East Coast at 94. But my grandfather, 87, is just too old to drive a car, even though he drives every single day and hasn't had any incidences. So basically, what I said was that they have no authority overstepping their bounds. If he has any problem with his driving, he would have points on his license, or he would have been in a wreck, and the BMB would be responsible for pulling his license. They have nothing on him, but they're trying to make something. And then they wanted to change his medicine routine. Well, you just all of a sudden want to start changing his medicine around. Oh, take these out. Take this half a pill out. And like, I looked at myself, I probably wouldn't do that. I said, I'm not a medical expert, but my opinion would say that they're trying to mess up your medicine to hopefully kind of cause you to maybe get dizzy or something, or forgetful, or he needs to take another one of these pills every day. I don't know about that. Have you been having any problems? If not, I wouldn't change shit. So, yeah, my mistrust in the medical field is definitely high. But the government medical field, that woman, is a part of too. So therefore, does she really know better? Does she really know better than Chris Christie or the government or any of the other doctors? Or, I think that's why, me personally, I would have no problem quarantining myself. For a simple fact is, there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going on. Definitely when you've seen Ebola outbreaks since, I know at least back to 2000, and they go away. Small outbreak, go away. Small outbreak, go away. This one's just hits 3 different countries and explodes. Now people with Ebola have made it to other countries. I've seen another one. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know if I can, but no, I've seen it somewhere. Where is it? Gotta find out where I've seen it at first. Huh. Well, I seen a report. I don't have it right here in front of me, but Australia stopping flights from West Africa. So you've seen other countries do it, and they haven't had Ebola. We haven't done it, and we've got it here, and luckily we haven't seen it turn into a pandemic. But it's definitely something that we should be a little bit more cautious about, I think. And you gotta remember too that you make the choice to go over there. And I applaud you for doing it, but don't be arrogant or selfish and come back and put other people at risk. Okay. Moving on. There was something I seen coming out of the blaze. And then I went and watched yesterday's Glenn Beck program after I seen the stuff on the blaze. Let me find the article here. Let me see if I can find it quick enough. Maybe. So much stuff has come out. It's kind of getting hard to find anything. It was here. Now if I can find it. Not finding it. Oh, here it is. And this is something that has to do with our youth. And if it'll load here. This is titled Glenn Beck Joins Forces with the Unlikely Group to Fight the Sexualization of Halloween Costumes. And it says here, Glenn Beck on Tuesday joined forces with an unlikely group of women to fight the sexualization of children's Halloween costumes. The producers decided to put together a little pre-interview package so you can see how dramatically opposed we are on issues, like Beck said on his television program. Because if we are this far apart, but we can come together and spend an hour and be decent human beings with each other and say we've got to stop this, then we can solve pretty much any problem. In the package, Dr. Janie Aragon, a political science professor at the University of Victoria, said she is absolutely ready for Hillary. And she has a mask of Hillary Clinton's face and posters supporting Clinton's 2008 campaign in her office, which just about makes me puke in my mouth, but that's besides the point. Pam Rocker of Take Back Halloween said her only exposure to Beck has been on The Daily Show and the Colbert Report, which adamantly didn't leave her with the most positive view. And you can watch the complete segment if you go to that article too. But what they got into was the simple fact that they're making these outfits to fit little girls, but to have the look of, I want to say a prostitute, but damn near a showgirl at least. And these little kids. And, I've watched these other parents that they've had, the whole thing about child beauty pageants and all that, and some of the routines and stuff dance squads do, or, all these sexualization things with the young kids. Well, I think it's because there's a lot of people that are in high ranks of governments, corporations, that are in on the pedophilia rings. And I have one here from We Are Change. And this one's elite pedophilia ring on private network exposed, the Groucho Club. So, I'm going to play this here.
2,000 members on the forum, 900,000 posts, right? And children as young as 5 on sale for sex. Wow. Yeah, hi. I'm Tyrone D. Murphy. I'm a filmmaker and a magazine editor and publisher. And I was invited along here today by the organisers, who are organising different events from forced adoption to child abuse. Myself and another broadcast journalist made the discovery of a paedophile network operating on the Groucho Club's own private members forum. The Groucho Club is the premier media club in the world. It's frequented by celebrities, by news people, by editors, journalists, and so on. And when we discovered that, we contacted the police, and we made over 24 complaints to the police and to CEOP, the Child Exploitation Online Service. And we were dismayed to find out 2 weeks later that the police had closed the investigation. When the police failed to act, we contacted a number of MPs, and we asked those MPs, right, to look into it. So they made inquiries with the Metropolitan Police Service. So it was only then investigated by the same officer who failed to investigate it in the first place. And his first order of action was to issue a false report, right, basically saying that we didn't really make any of the reports, and the only pornography that was on the Groucho Club private members forum was legal porn, despite images and videos of children as young as 5. The report went on to say that a rape that we reported was never reported. The officer, we said, that we reported the rape and the child pornography to never existed. We made an appeal to the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission. Well, they asked a high-ranking officer to investigate their failure to investigate. And the strange thing was, the officer that they tasked with this investigation was only the officer who issued the report in the first place. So he was asked to investigate himself. But the strongest evidence is a 15-page statement, which is a very explosive, from a manager, a night manager of the Groucho Club, who came forward to support my case. Not just all the links that were copied and the information that was copied by a fellow broadcast journalist, but also the reams of letters that were totally misleading, not just to me, but to the courts. The evidence that all the links were there, that the domain name said they didn't know anything about, was theirs. We've got the ages and the names of the people who were operating on the forum. So there's substantial evidence there. Despite that, the police sat back and allowed someone to destroy the evidence and make an application to Google to remove thousands of cached pages. So the IPCC upheld my appeal, saying that elements of the report were inaccurate, despite it being totally untrue. And they said that the police officer involved, because he's ill, is retiring soon, so they're not taking any action against him. So the police investigation was a complete farce. The Groucho Club have never made a public statement. This was an organised, well-organised, child pornography network that were operating for 11 months. Now, the sinister thing is that not one member came forward and said, "Excuse me, there's a child pornography network operating on here." Not one, you know?
So when you have things like that, it constantly being exposed, really, or, the whistle being blown on it, most of the time these people end up dead that start blowing the whistle on it. Tend to be why you don't see people from the inside blowing the whistle. It's usually people discovering it and, blowing the lid on it, and, well, that's usually what you see happen. Either someone dies or they just hide it. Bury it. I just don't see any of it going away. They'll just continue to hide it and direct your attention elsewhere, which it's constantly doing. We know this. It's not something new. It's been going on for a very long time. How many times does it have to be exposed before you go, hey, they might actually be doing this. Give me a second here. Trying to get this to load. Now, what happens when you give the state this extremely monopolized force? They have basically a run of the mill. Do they help people out that have been wronged? Does this happen? Well, it might happen occasionally. But for the most part, what we end up seeing is more harm being done by government, federal and local, a lot of times. Detroit. Take Detroit, for example. Politicians throughout the years have really made something of themselves out of Detroit. Except for the whole failed Detroit thing. the collapse of Detroit. Well, that was federal government. Well, some of you are working at the federal level now, aren't you? Some of them. Well, what are you doing? Nothing. Well, here's something else out of Detroit, and you can find the article for it, and the article is at benswan.com too. State orders man to pay $30,000 in child support or face jail, despite proof he is not the father. Yeah, you heard it right. This is what you get from government. That's there to help you. Until they are elected, then they're there to screw you over. Again, out of Ben Swan, and the YouTube video has Detroit man being forced to pay $30,000 in child support despite being the father.
Carnell Alexander is a wanted man tonight.
The state of Michigan is demanding he pay thousands of dollars or go to prison.
And it's all because of a child support case that has spiraled out of control.
And as 7 Action News reporter Kim Russell reports, it's a case with a bizarre twist because everybody agrees the kid is not his.
I feel like I'm standing in front of a brick wall with nowhere to go.
Carnell Alexander is forever haunted by the big news he got in 1991 during a traffic stop in Detroit. You're a deadbeat dad, the cop said. You're a wanted man. You're coming with me.
I knew I didn't have a child, so I was kind of blown back.
Blown back and locked up. Carnell was arrested for failing to pay almost $70,000 in child support. The state said he fathered a child in 1987 and had ignored a court order to pay up. It was the first Carnell had heard of it. And when you were telling them in court
that it was not my child, he told me it was too late to get a DNA.
But he did anyway, and the test proved Carnell was not the dad. Still, a judge was unmoved.
She told me that regardless to the fact of what the DNA say, because I didn't contact her 24 years ago, it's going to stick. Case closed. I got to pay for the baby.
What the court focused on was this. Records show Carnell ignored a court order of the paternity case in the late 1980s. Action News pieced that chain of events together. Here's what we found.
The state then sent a process server to Carnell's dad's house in Highland Park. The process server was supposed to deliver to Carnell this summons. The process server then signed this summons saying that Carnell was delivered it, but refused to sign it.
I wasn't there, so I couldn't refuse to sign.
Indeed, records show Carnell had been arrested as a young man and was locked up when the process server came to the house.
I had no knowledge that I had a child support case pending against me.
As for why there was a case at all, someone had put Carnell's name on an application for welfare benefits. An ex who was in a jam when her baby was born.
I had to turn to welfare to get assistance to take care of them, and I had to put him down as the father. That was the only way I can get assistance.
While she doesn't want to show her face, this woman is now fighting to help Carnell.
Everything is my fault that I put him through.
Do you think that he should have to pay this money?
No, he shouldn't have to pay it at all. I want everything to go away for him so he can go on with his life.
We still know it's not my child. Let's do what we need to do, what's right.
A few months ago, a judge did erase the debt that Carnell owed that mom of the kid that's not his, but not the debt owed to the state, $30,000 for welfare benefits paid over the years. He says he's going to keep fighting until all of the debt is erased. Kim Russell, 7 Action News.
So the state fails to prove that he's the father. They're the ones that are saying that he's the father when he's saying, no, I'm not. So without proof that he's the father, he should have to pay $30,000 because he didn't know about the whole situation. They're like, well, we'll erase that debt, but you still owe us $30,000. No, that was your fault. You gave her the benefits. You didn't come put a warrant out for me. You didn't come search me down and say, you have a kid until 20 years later. Because of the debt. Not because I had a kid that I should take care of. Because of the money. It's about government officials and money and power. And when government becomes about that, you will not see a government that is looking out for your best interests. It will not happen. And that's what we have. And it's so evident. So that's why I support, like the Free State Project. Politically at a local level, civil disobedience, which that's not the Free State Project, that's more of the activists up in New Hampshire that some are a part of Free State Project, some are just libertarians moving up there for the whole idea of the Free Thought Project, or Free State Project, and they are doing things up there that are actually changing what's going on up there. And even jury nullification. They've been spreading that around. Cop block. They do cop blocking up there a lot. And we've seen how they were trying to pin riots and all that stuff for the Pumpkin Festival. Trying to say, oh, they're going to start something. They're going to start something. And then they go, look what they're saying about us. We are not going to be starting any violent things. Then you've seen the whole rioting at the college. And, one thing I start thinking is they probably brought some provocateurs in there. Alcohol, college kids, and a few people to stir the pot. And I think they originally planned on blaming it on, Free Thought Project, or Free State Project, I keep saying Free Thought, and the cop blockers, and the libertarian activists. And I think because of such a engaged and proactive libertarian community up there, I think that's what keeps things like that from happening. Those people up there are dedicated, and you also got things like the Jefferson State movement out west. You have pockets of freedom forming. And I hope they keep growing. More people that really start looking into what it means to be free, what is freedom, what is liberty. Yeah, I think once you truly understand it, you have no choice but to root for it. Not because all of a sudden it's going to create this utopia. It's the fact that that's what the elites want to do for themselves. And hell with the rest of us. And they convince you that they're trying to create this utopia that you get to be a part of. And you will for a while. Till you wear out your welcome or your usefulness to them. They are the ones that are putting out the false utopia. Libertarians don't claim that once we become a free society, everything will be perfect. No. We're saying that government doesn't stop it. Doesn't stop the rapes, doesn't stop the violence. But what it does is create a cozy little bed for some of the top criminals to have a monopoly on force. Not only don't they stop it, a lot of times they commit these acts. Now, there's other countries that are worse off than us. We should be thankful for that. But we're going to be worse off than they are if we don't stop the path we're on. We have to be that change. And if we don't step up to the plate, we're really going to start having issues that we won't be able to get out of. Okay. If this will work. Which I don't know if it is. Keeps messing up on me. What the hell? Yeah. Just trying to get this to pop up. And Ebola quarantine, what Ebola is really about, this one from AMTV. And he's put out quite a bit of good information on Ebola. Go to AMTV on YouTube and check out everything he's been putting out about Ebola. And he makes good points. And like he says, there's a lot of uncertainties. But we have to look at what's possible and the what government does and how they could use this. So I'm going to go ahead and play this.
Hey everybody, Green, and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. So what is Ebola really about? I'm absolutely convinced after watching the president speak today, on the White House lawn with the helicopter behind him. He, usually gives speeches on how he's bombing Syria, Iraq, and now Ebola. All of it is a humanitarian effort by the president, by the way. I mean, he's the guy that was going to withdraw troops. He's the leftist liberal scumbag. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So when he goes to war, when he attacks independent sovereign nations, a continuation and an expansion of the George W. Bush era wars, he's different. He's a guy that pundits and comedians like Bill Maher can support, that buy into the liberal bullshit agenda that makes up the president of the United States today. But back to the question, the pervasive question, what is Ebola really about? I'm absolutely convinced that Ebola is about power and control. And more importantly, it's about quarantine. The same thing that happened during World War II, FDR quarantining innocent Japanese Americans, and sending them to internment camps, concentration camps, simply because they were Japanese at the time, gave the president, through executive action, executive order, total power and control. And it's exactly what Ebola does for the president of the United States. It gives him power and control to quarantine. And it's a reason why. It's the fundamental reason why, in my opinion, the president hasn't shut down incoming flights from Ebola-stricken countries. The Ebola hot zone, it's why he's allowing the infection to take root here in the United States of America, is why he's allowing doctors like Craig Spencer to come back from Liberia wearing full protective gear and then going bowling, going to the park, using Uber, a taxi service, exposing himself to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people through the New York City subway system. Because again, it grants the liberal leftist bullshit, warmongering, commander-in-thief, President Barack Obama, total power and total control through quarantine. It makes it more difficult to travel internationally. But more importantly, it creates the police state militarization environment that Obama loves so much. We saw this post during the Boston bombings, where the two alleged suspects, just two of them, were on the run, brought an entire American city to a standstill. You had cops and special elite forces in the streets gunning down Just two dudes. Two dudes that supposedly, allegedly used pressure cookers to bomb the Boston Marathon. Again, all it was about power, control, the militarization of these new barbarians that call themselves police officers, that use vehicles like MRAPs, the same vehicles that they use in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. The places that Obama has continued the wars and is currently bombing today. So this, folks, is about quarantine. This is about power. So you can shut down an entire American city, Dallas, for example. You can shut down an entire movement, let's just say the Tea Party, for example, or a person. All you have to do as the President of the United States is scream Ebola. And under the guise of his executive action and the threat of disease. Again, it's about fear, folks. He mentioned multiple times during his speech today on the lawn, where he declares wars currently in Iraq and Syria, and now talks about Ebola. This is all about the power of quarantine. It gives the president total and absolute control over the American population. And so the president needs total power. He needs total control. He needs the threat of a disease. Fear. Again, he mentioned multiple times that Americans aren't fearful people. We shouldn't fear this. The CDC said the same thing, they actually said we should fear it, but anytime they mention fear, or repeat something, or the president says that, we're not fearful as Americans, that means he wants you to be fearful. And as long as Americans are fearful, they have no problem with quarantine. They have no problem with shutting down, declaring martial law of an American city, whether or not it was the recent example of Boston, around the Boston bombings, or it's potentially Dallas. Just happens to be in a liberty state like the great state of Texas that grossly opposes the administration. So this, to me, is what Ebola is really about, folks. It's about spreading fear. It's about power. It's about control. And it's about the ability of the president to quarantine anybody, anyone, any city, any town, in any part of the country. It's the same reason he's sending troops over to Liberia, setting up AFRICOM, these command posts now. It doesn't make logical sense. It's not like our troops can shoot at the virus. Why would he be sending members of our military to fire at Ebola? There's a reason why he's sending and militarizing this part of the world. And he's doing the same thing in the United States of America. For those of you that think this is conspiracy theory, all you have to do is look to history. Whether or not it is the rounding up of innocent Japanese Americans into internment camps against their will, or it's the McCarthy era. Remember, you're a communist. You might not be a communist, but if they want you to be a communist, you'll certainly be one. And they'll pretty much character assassinate you and execute you publicly in any way they choose. All of this about power and control, the ability to the president to quarantine the American people. And this is what Ebola is really about. Again, I believe Ebola to be a very serious threat, a very real disease that is likely airborne today, that has been engineered and is being used as biological warfare by the United States federal government, or potentially maybe even a rogue nation state or a terrorist organization. But either way, it's going to be politicized and used to gear up the American people to spread more fear and to control the masses and to push anyone, maybe you, into quarantine for that matter, if the president deems so fit. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.
So the point is that this disease can be contained. It will be defeated. Progress is possible, but we're going to have to stay vigilant, and we've got to make sure that we're working together. We have to keep leading the global response. America cannot look like it is shying away because other people are watching what we do. And if we don't have a robust international response in West Africa, then we are actually endangering ourselves here back home. In order to do that, we've got to make sure that those workers who are willing and able and dedicated to go over there in a really tough job, that they're applauded, thanked, and supported. That should be our priority. And we can make sure that when they come back, they are being monitored in a prudent fashion. But we want to make sure that we understand that they are doing God's work over there. And they're doing that to keep us safe. And I want to make sure that every policy we put in place is supportive of their efforts. Because if they are successful, then we're not going to have to worry about Ebola here at home. America, in the end, is not defined by fear. That's not who we are. America is defined by possibility, and when we see a problem and we see a challenge, then we fix it. We don't just react based on our fears. Thank you.
Concerned, sir, that there might be some confusion between the quarantine rules used by the military and used by healthcare workers and by some states?
Well, the military is in a different situation, obviously, because they are, first of all, not treating patients. Second of all, they are not there voluntarily. It's part of their mission that's been assigned to them by their commanders and ultimately by me, the commander-in-chief. So we don't expect to have similar rules for our military as we do for civilians. They are already, by definition, if they're in the military, under more circumscribed conditions.
Okay, now how does this all come full circle? Well, to kind of get into what he's talking about, that the whole quarantine thing is about control. To go back to the nurse that for some reason might seem to be a little arrogant and just allowing all this to just happen, basically. Daily Caller released Ebola nurse Casey Hitchcock works for CDC. Her lawyer is a White House visitor. Ebola healthcare worker Casey Hitchcock, who was released from quarantine with the support of the White House, is a Center for Disease Control and Prevention employee, records reveal. The lawyer who helped earn her release is a recent White House state dinner guest. Hitchcock was released from Ebola quarantine in Newark, New Jersey, Monday afternoon, after the White House pressured New Jersey Governor Chris Christie to release the nurse that was working in Sierra Leone with Doctors Without Borders. Hitchcock's case for release was also bolstered by New York civil rights attorney Norman Siegel, who took on Hitchcock's case. I feel like my basic human rights have been violated, Hitchcock said before she was evaluated by CDC and transported back to her home in Maine. Here's an overlooked factor that could have contributed to her White House-backed release. Hitchcock is official CDC Epidemic Intelligence Service officer who performed work for the CDC in recent months. Hitchcock was class of 2012 member of CDC's 2-year EIS officer training program, according to the official program for CDC's 2014 EIS conference, page 98, which was held from April 28 to May 1st, 2014. Hitchcock was featured in a photograph in the program. Hitchcock was listed as an EIS officer for the CDC and in program materials for a CDC course she taught in July of 2014. She was specifically listed as an active EIS officer as recently as June 18, 2014, according to CDC documents. Hitchcock was a presenter at the CDC conference this spring, according to the program's list of presenters, page 103. Hitchcock taught an April 29th session called Contact Investigation of Healthcare Personnel Exposed to Maternal and Neonatal Tuberculosis, Clark County, Nevada, 2013, at the conference, page 3. During the 2-year training program, EIS officers are employees of the CDC and receive a salary, and benefit salaries range from $65,000 to $90,000 per year based on qualifications and experience, according to CDC's website. Hitchcock's lawyer, Norman Siegel, meanwhile, was an official guest at the White House State Dinner on February 11, 2014, accompanying Jackie Robinson's widow, Rachel Robinson, who supported Siegel's failed 2009 run for New York City public advocate. Siegel is a former director of the New York affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union. Siegel previously partnered with Al Sharpton to fight against a New York State proposal to keep a DNA database of felons. Siegel did not return a request for comment. Now, what I could see here is easily, even if she doesn't have Ebola, even if it's not her, if Ebola starts spreading, and then they can go, look, we made a mistake, we're doing the voluntary quarantine. You know what? From now on, if anybody's got any respiratory illness or any other thing or coughing, we're just going to quarantine them. Like, yeah, like that. Like they would want to do something like that, even though Obama just signed right before it really started going mainstream with Ebola. He signed an executive order to do just that. They don't need an actual outbreak. They don't need an actual epidemic. Let's look back maybe at H1N1 or the bird flu. How many people got paranoid and ran out and got a vaccine? They know how to instill fear in certain people. Maybe not you and me, but we understand that they play these mental games with the populace. We understand how governments have done it in the past. We've seen sometimes the inability to protect yourself from that. And sometimes in history shown the ignorance of the people to go along with it, not knowing what they were getting themselves into. And yes, Vince, I do have lines open. If you want to call in right now before the end of the broadcast, go ahead. Yeah, we can see what can happen with government by using our fears against us. And all we have to do is look at our history. Now, if we get to the point that we start seeing this, it's going to be interesting to see what the nation does. Do we have a point where we completely bend it off, say no? And we have Vince on the line. Vince, what would you like to add to it?
Hey, Josh, how you doing? Good to talk to you, bud. Of course, everybody's talking about Ebola, and some people say it ain't even real, and others that it's just you being used for control. But I won't even talk about that right now. It does present some bona fide questions, and what authority would people have of being quarantined and stuff like that. But it just seems to me like these people are just trying to get a paycheck out of it, And why would this woman go over there first of all, and then come back and not? I mean, if you're exposing yourself to that, not as part of the system or being subjugated and that, but a responsibility to mankind. If you're going to go over to a place where that could possibly infect everybody, where you can come back home to, shouldn't. I mean, it just makes common sense. Maybe there'd be a facility where you can go to, just like when they came back from the moon, just in case.
Yeah, like
they didn't know
like I was saying, I would happily quarantine myself. I wouldn't even twitch at it. I took myself over there and brought myself back. I can quarantine myself.
I think that's a fair thing to do. But now there's some girl got suspended or something like that. I didn't hear the whole story, but part of it, she got sued now or something. Her parents are suing.
Yeah, I believe that was over some BB guns or something. Or was that something?
I thought it had something to do with Ebola.
I can't remember. I've seen so much news lately.
I don't watch the news on purpose anyway.
I read it, so.
Yeah. I kind of let most of the stuff get filtered to me, through trusted sources, especially here on UCY. And Jules has really been covering the whole Ebola thing. Of course, there's other people there's everybody on the other end of this spectrum saying, it's fake. But, I think Ebola is real. I think we can find it back to the 50s or 60s and certainly the 70s when it was patented. And, it's a militarized virus. The government owns patents on it. So, I mean, the fact that Ebola is real, I think, is probably certain. But its origins and its spread, I think World Health Organization uses it for population control, certainly in certain African countries. And look at Somalia, and stuff. Any place, or Nigeria, I guess I should be saying. Anywhere there's, a place that, political interest, it seems like people have problems when, either economic hitman or, I just know. I think it is being used for a tool, certainly, but it is I would think, a definite threat and one that we should really be careful about.
And, it all comes down to whether, Ebola becomes an epidemic or not. Either way, it's going to be used to their advantage because they don't ever let any crisis go, unabated.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'll let you close that, but I appreciate that. I just wanted to weigh in because I got some serious questions about it, too. I mean, we as, anarcho libertarians or whatever you want to title it, we kind of have problems with the government, pushing us around it. In the definition of government, I think they do, it does include quarantine, so. And if people aren't smart enough to quarantine themselves, then maybe somebody does need to put them in quarantine. I don't know.
And the fear is it'll come down on all of us. Thank you again.
Thanks, Josh. Bye-bye.
Bye. And, that's really what it comes down to. If we don't start being self-responsible, that's the, perfect breeding ground for a bigger government. We have to be self-responsible. And by going over there, quarantine yourself. Because guess what? If you're willing to do it, then government doesn't have anywhere to step in. If you're quarantining yourself, do you think the public's going to stand up for you when they try to come and haul you away with guns? When proper measures are being taken by the people instead of the government, government's justification for existing tends to start to disappear. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Definitely stay tuned for the next broadcast here on UCY.TV, the Continual Condition, coming up next live. And, it's one of those things we have to start standing on our own 2 feet. We can't let the government rule us with fear. We have to understand that they will use any crisis to their advantage. We have to be responsible enough to handle the crisis without them. We have to be the leaders of our own lives. And that's a responsibility. And We're not going to be perfect. No one's ever perfect. But if we're taking the steps and we're making better progress than the government, we ruled out their existence. I'll see you this Friday. Take care and stay tuned here on UCY.tv.